in October, I decided that I was going to do an experiment that would challenge, I guess, like the multi-journal approach, if you will. I've never participated in one journal July because I don't think that that's the kind of thing for me. Like specifically when it comes to planning and journaling, I can't really mix the two. But this particular experiment, I was very intrigued by and very excited for. And I'll talk a bit more about that as the video progresses. I do have a setup video for this journal on the channel. If you want to check that out, I will link it up above. But in today's video, we're going to be going through the flip through and chat a bit about the stuff that I learned while using this journal specifically. I think I mentioned it in the setup video, but just in case I didn't, or just in case you don't want to go and look at it, I got this idea after watching a video by Hungry Gal Studios where she set up Astrology, and she set that up as like a monthly book. She used it for a lot of other things than what I did, but her video was really what like kind of lit the light bulb in my brain and led to this particular experiment of using just one journal in October. And then the decision to use this Moleskine A5 was because I was looking at content by Lindsay Scribbles and Seaweed Kisses here on YouTube and Randy.plans on Instagram. So that was why I decided to use this particular journal. And with all of that housekeeping kind of out of the way, let's get started talking about, the general setup of this journal and how it diverges from my usual journaling practice. So if you are not new to my channel, then you'll know all about this. But if you are new, let's just go ahead and do a little like overview. My usual journaling system involves multiple journals, right? So I'm usually in some sort of like A5 journal for my morning pages. That's usually a Leuchtturm A5. But really it can be any journal. I'm not very picky when it comes to my morning pages, the journal that it's in, but it is normally in an A5 journal. And then for like memory keeping and daily logging this year, I've mostly been in Traveler's Notebooks inserts, and I have many flip throughs and setups of those throughout the channel if you want to check those out. I'll leave a couple linked as well. But usually those daily logs will last me like a quarter in the Traveler's Notebook insert. And aside from that, I have the the Hobonichi Cousin I've been using as an art journal, and that's somewhere here on my desk. And I have a mixture of Traveler's Notebook inserts and the Sterling Ink Common Planner for my media journal, and I do have that here, as you can see. So I have this one as my media journal along with other TN inserts. And then I've been experimenting with a few other journals, which you can kind of see here on the side. But I will talk a bit more about how my system looks like currently in another video. I'm planning on doing that Techokaigi soon. And then also talking about my 2025 lineup, but that's going to be for other videos. In this one, we're going to look at this particular journal, but I just kind of wanted to give some background information to show you how this diverges from like the usual multi-journal system that I have. So even in October, the media journal was still a thing. I didn't touch the media journal, but I did decide that I wanted to consolidate the morning pages and the daily logging / memory keeping into this Moleskine. And one of the reasons that I wanted to do that was kind of like, one of the reasons I don't like big all year round notebooks is because I tend to be a little more precious with sticking things in. That's why I didn't do very well in the Paper Test B6, because I was afraid to glue things in and make them bulky and what have you. I also kind of really like the idea of having 12 of these in a year, kind of having like 12 consolidated little notebooks. I thought that that would be really cool on a shelf. So I just wanted to experiment and see if I ended up liking it at all. And then I also, when I was working in my TN a few times for the daily log, I've ended up doing day per page. And for the most part, honestly, that hasn't worked super great. But in the month, I think in September, I did that day per page to finish off the insert. And I did really enjoy that. And so I was kind of excited because the way that I set up this journal, and we'll kind of look at it in a second, the way that I set it up was that I was going to end up having 2 days per page for daily logging and memory keeping. And so I was particularly intrigued with that, and I was curious to see how I'd end up using them. I'm going to go ahead and do a flip through of this with some music first, so you guys can see all of the pages, and then we can go ahead and talk about kind of like what I discovered while using the journal and what were the pros and the cons and also kind of like what information I gathered from using this, and it's going to translate into my systems moving forward, and how a lot of it has already translated. So I figured we could do the flip through first. I will do that now with some music in the background, and then I will jump back in to kind of tell you a little bit more about the journal itself. If that makes sense? Does that make sense? So let's do that. So that was the full flip through, and as you can see, I did set it up so that the front pages had the morning pages, then were the daily log section, and then the miscellaneous notes. I did not flip through the morning pages because that is not something that I share on my channel or on the internet or anywhere at all. I don't even share that with like friends. That's purely mine. I do occasionally write about some of the excerpts that I've had from my morning pages, but I do not share those on the internet as is. It's just a space for me to kind of like stream of consciousness, get through some things, work through stuff, and what have you. So I don't share those. But I did have a morning page section, and I had set up, I believe, either 3 or 4 pages per day. I usually do 3 pages on an A5 regular, but the Moleskine is a little smaller than the A5, and so I set up, I think it was either 3 or 4. But either way, I ended up with a lot of blank pages. The journal in total, the way that I counted it, one little fun fact is that I did number the journal manually, but I numbered it backwards so that the last page would be the first page. And so the way that I numbered it, it's 190 pages. Of those 190 pages, I only ended up using 32 for morning pages. And so if we're talking about there's 31 days in October and I only used 32 morning pages, that's on average on one a day. I didn't do a lot of morning pages in October, like at all. I think that there was only like 11 days of the month, or probably even less, that I ended up doing morning pages. It was a really, really bad month for it. Um, in the daily log portion, you saw that there was a lot of blank pages. So I wrote in about 45 to 50 because I did include some of them that had like little bit of writing. So like for example, this one I did count as one that I wrote in, even though it's mostly empty. So I wrote in about 45 to 50 of the 61 pages for the daily log portion. Um, and then there was 11 days that I did not journal in at all, as you saw. And then on the notes pages, I used 9 of the 26. So at the end of the day, if you count all those up, there was about 130 pages that ended up blank at the end of the experiment, which it sounds like a lot. Definitely a lot more blank pages than not, but I don't like, does that mean that it's a failure? Like, does that mean that this journal is a failure of an experiment or a failure of our journal? I don't think so. I think that October was a very hard month for me because there was a lot of activity in the beginning. My sister was here on vacation for 2 weeks, and so there was a lot of activity in the first couple of weeks. And then in the final weeks of the month, there was a lot of stress related to work stuff and my job and financials. And so it was a very hectic month, both in a good sense and in a bad sense. And so when I am very active and also very stressed, what ends up getting affected is my journaling. Like, it's one of those things, right? And I'm sure a lot of us are the same, where journaling really helps us, but also when we are stressed out, it's one of the first things to go. And that was really the case for October. So it really is not the journal's fault so much as it's just that's how the month went. And of course, that is something that is part of life, right? Because our journals reflect our state of mind. They reflect our state of existence. And so, of course, this journal is only going to reflect how I was feeling in the month with or without content inside of it, right? Like if you're looking at the context of it, then that's what it gives. And so I know that a lot of you don't really like blank pages, and that's totally fine. Obviously, everyone gets to decide what they'd like and don't like. Um, but for me, I don't really mind the blank pages in the daily log portion because it also tells a story to me. I know, like this one week that I didn't journal at all, it was like pretty much every single day of the week is blank. Which one is it? This one. Was it this one or this one? Well, there's one week where basically, yeah, like the whole week is blank. I know I was going through it that week, like 100%. I might not remember what exactly was happening, but I know for a fact that I was absolutely going through it because of the fact that they're blank, right? So they also tell a story. Now, that being said, I do have a plan for some of the other blank pages, not the daily pages. I'm not going to go back and backlog those, but some of the other blank pages I do have a plan for. I will talk a bit more about that later on towards the end of the video. But I did kind of want to talk about now kind of like what my like the takeaways and the challenges of the journal, why outside of like just my circumstances, right? Like what specifically about the journal worked and what didn't. First and foremost, I had no issues with this paper. I know that moleskines are very controversial in the journaling community because they are hit or miss. This particular journal, if you noticed here in the back, I did swatches. Where are the swatches? Here we are. And I didn't have any issues with any of my pens, any of my tombos. There was some feathering on some pages with some pens, but not enough to be off-putting, at least not for me. This is my second Moleskine. I have also the day per page pocket, and I don't have any issues with that one either. So the two Moleskines that I've bought have been unicorns, if you will. So I haven't had an issue with that. That's one of the first things. I had a very pleasant experience writing in this and all of my pens and what have you. Um, Something that was interesting, of course, that we've already talked about is the sections, right? So I don't normally have sections like this in journals. I usually shy away from sections because they feel very constraining to me and I get nervous about the number of pages and all that stuff. I wasn't really concerned with that aspect because I had dedicated my like the most important part was the daily pages, and I know for a fact I'm never going to go over two pages per day. I struggle enough as it is with one page. I knew I wasn't going to go over with 2 pages per day, so I really wasn't scared of that specifically. However, I think that having the morning pages in here is definitely a flop. I do prefer just having a notebook and I will write in it when I write in it. um I don't really like having kind of like pages for morning pages where it's a specific amount, because sometimes I'll write more, sometimes I'll write less, sometimes I won't make it to do a morning page in that day. And that's, while I don't like it because definitely can tell a difference between my mental state when I do morning pages versus when I don't, sometimes that just happens, right? And I don't want my journal to then also create another, I guess, stress point, because I feel like I'm having all of these empty pages that need to be used, right? And I think that was one of the main reasons why I did end up putting morning pages in the front and then the daily log, because I mean, end of the day, I could always use the difference. I never expected to use every single morning page because that would be an ideal perfect world, and I know that at least one day I'm gonna miss morning pages. Um, but yeah, I missed a lot of morning pages in the month. So that really wasn't working for me. Another thing that I was very surprised about is that in my TNs specifically, I really don't have any issue gluing things in, whether it's more junky stuff, whether it's like more precious stuff, whether it's stickers, it doesn't really matter. I don't have any qualms of sticking things into my TN daily log, and I was really expecting that to be the case in here, but I found myself really struggling to glue things into here that were more junk adjacent. So like for example, I did end up tipping this later on in the month, and I did end up tipping this tipping this in as well, sorry. And a few little bits and pieces, but for the most part, I don't have much junk in here except for like maybe this. I was really struggling to glue things into here, which was not something that I expected at all. I really thought that this was going to be even more junk journal adjacent than some of my other inserts, but it was not. I don't know if it's because it's a bigger format or where that comes from. I know that it's not the paper because I know that this is technically lesser quality paper than Midori and Tomoe paper. So I don't think it was that. But I did find myself hesitating to glue things in, which was definitely a unexpected psychological barrier. And something that I didn't enjoy because I really do like the junk journalness that happens with my daily logs. Um, the way that I'm going to be doing daily logs next year is a little different. And so I've had to kind of shift that. But when I was in this journal, I was still very much wanting to do junk journaling in this. And so the fact that I was really struggling to do that was definitely a con. Um, that being said, not everything was a miss. There was a lot of cool stuff that I found myself doing and liking in this journal that I hadn't done in other ones. So the first one, and I think I have, do I have a section where I wrote it down? I feel like I did, but I could be wrong. Here we go. So I first saw the checking in on the Common Corner, Elle's videos. She does a check-in. I don't know, I can't remember if she does it every single time, but I know for a fact that at least in the start, like when she first checks into her journal, she'll put in the time. And that is something that I have always really liked, but I struggled with doing that specifically because I wasn't sure what I would do if I was backlogging, right? Like if I was backlogging the next day, what time do I put? I don't want to put the time that I'm checking in because that's not really the time of the day. And so I decided, I found out working through this journal that I was going to use a little star when I was doing backlogging. And so I started checking in, like putting in the time every single time I was checking in. Because what I end up doing with the daily log specifically is that it's very stream of consciousness in the sense of whenever I want to write something, I just go in and write something. And so, like, for example, here I checked in at 8:32. I also wrote in at 10:04, at 10:20, 11:53. And this is pretty haphazard stuff. Like, it's not anything groundbreaking or anything like that. Let me zoom you in a little bit so you can see what I'm talking about a little better. So here you can see, right, I wrote 10:04, feeling a bit emotionally, a bit, you read that. I'm not going to say that because of YouTube. Emotionally right now, which is not great. I'm struggling to concentrate. 11:53. I told Nat about my inner turmoil and I think I feel a little better. And so just at 2:53 I wrote I want to take a long nap actually. And then I wrote at um 4:24 I tried to take a nap, but gosh, what a brutal day. And so um I decided that I was gonna do the time every single time, and what I every single time. How many times can you say time in one sentence? I decided I was gonna do that every single time I checked in, and I have really been enjoying that. And then if I ever needed to backlog, which I'm not 100% sure if I have any in here, but if I ever need to backlog, then I would do the signifier, the little star. Another thing that I found doing this particular in this particular journal is that if I was going to do any media journaling kind of like reactions, I would do a little MJ and the circle for media journal and dot it, which honestly I had forgotten about until I was looking through this journal again. This is particularly good to remember because of how I'm going to. I just decided today as I'm recording this. So the day that I'm recording this, earlier today, I finally, I think, decided what I was gonna do for my like what my 2025 system is gonna look like. And so having this here is actually very, very cool because that's gonna matter for 2025 very, very much. And let's see, another thing I really enjoyed, kind of like having the 2 pages, particularly because some days I found myself using just the days like as notes, right? So here's my daily log, and then here I was having just some journaling thoughts that I kind of wanted to go through, and I wrote them on the same page, and I did really enjoy that, kind of like having a space to also write about the things that I was thinking about in the day. A lot of the times when I do my daily log, it's very just like matter of fact, stream of consciousness, reaction based. And I don't want it to just be reaction based, if you will. I really like the idea of also capturing what I'm thinking about in a more complex way. So here kind of having a section for journal thoughts specifically and not just thinking about journals, right? Kind of having like headers, if you will. I really enjoyed having space for that. I really enjoyed having little sections where I could just be like, "Hey, need to do this," and I think I did that a few times here towards the end. Let's see. I know there was one here. This page. I really like this page. I wrote here what we have planned for the day, and I did a little checklist and I crossed them out if I needed to. Here's one of those signifiers that I was telling you about. I can see that just from looking at this, that I wrote about this the following day, if anything, or later on, because it's backlogged. There's that little signifier, which is just fun, right? It's fun to see, okay, I was actually in this journal. Maybe if I can, there we go. I was actually in this journal on whatever at 2:30 on Wednesday. I was in it. But then on this day, I wasn't in this journal this day at all. I ended up coming back and backlogging that. And that's like super fun to think about. Another thing that I was, this day, my cat Suki wasn't doing very well. She was not acting okay. She was vomiting and just very lethargic. And so I wanted to write down her symptoms and also like write about what day it was in case I needed to go to the vet. I had that reference later on. I even added a little tab on here just to make sure that I can get to it quickly. Another thing that I was experimenting with this in this journal specifically was putting in a um time strip and doing kind of like what happened in the day as a another form of like memory keeping. And I really enjoyed that as well. Overall, I did like the 2-page spread on the days that, or rather, the 2-page per day. I did really enjoy it on the days where it worked. But there was a lot of days where it didn't. And so I don't think that I will do it moving forward. Even though I did really like how it looked, it's just not something that is super sustainable. I'd rather have um an undated structure where I can just write when I need to and have that be what my daily logging is, right? And then just have a space where I can do those things regardless, right? So like for example, right now, and here's a little sneak peek. Right now I am experimenting in a Hobonichi weeks towards the end because I wanted to see if I was going to end up with a Hobonichi weeks for certain things next year. And in this, I'm daily logging here in the back. And it's today, it's the daily logging for today, but I did end up having a little section for just some things that I'm thinking about, the preliminary Techo Kaigi lineup. And so, that's one way that it's kind of informed my journaling, if you will, even outside of this specific journal, right? And so that's one of the reasons why I think that it's super important to experiment with journaling if you're okay with that. Of course, if you have routines and you kind of get frazzled with changing things, then don't do that. I know that I experiment that a lot with planning specifically. Like if every time I switch up my planning, way of doing things, it throws me off and throws me for a loop. So I'm more cautious with experimenting when it comes to planning, but I do really enjoy experimenting with my journaling because to me it's just another form of my creative expression, and I do like kind of pushing the boundaries of what I'm doing within my journals and what is working for me, right? Because we are creatures that evolve every single day and we change and we adapt. And so our journaling systems will need to continue to change along with us, right? Like the way that I journaled in 2014 is not the same way that I journal now. And so, because I've changed as a person. And so the things that I enjoy and the things that matter to me change. Um, and that's why I like to experiment with different journals and what have you. I was talking to Maddie from Hello Naya, and we were talking about that, right? Like about being creatures of habit versus um experimenters with journals. And we were talking about if I ever will be the type of person that is very comfortable and doesn't want to change in their journals. And I really doubt that I will. I'm just one of those people that just likes to constantly change. Um, Even though I do consider myself a creature of habit a lot of the times. Um, Let's see. Let's go to another spread that I really like. I really enjoyed this one. This is another example of one where I did my daily logging and then I just had this extra page as a notes page. These are some notes that I was going to do for some videos that I was doing for Patreon. I have a weekly journaling update, and then a slice of life video. I was also working on a bonus video for Patreon. And so I just had some notes here I didn't want to lose. And so that was very, very nice. I really did enjoy that. And then I also really did enjoy having the notes in the back, kind of just having a place where I could do notes that weren't necessarily pretty or ugly. I just needed a place to kind of like write those down. I realized that I do prefer having notes in a wider form. So like an A5 or a B6, the TN is a little slimmer and longer. And I think that for notes like this, I do prefer having a wider or more square-ish, um, like surface area for notes, and so I did really like, even though I only used like a couple of them, I did really like having a space for notes um on here. Let's see, is there anything else that I wanted to talk about? Oh, and then the last day, I got my Grabby order, which there is a video for. And I do have a 15% off coupon code for them if you want to check it out. They are a online art store, and they have this particular spread is based off of a subscription box that they have, but it is available a la carte if you were to be interested in. I will link the video up above, and I will also include the discount code down below if you are interested in that. But that was the last spread on here. I really enjoyed how this looked very much as well. I think that that's pretty much it in terms of what I can remember I wanted to specifically talk about. Um, I'm always talking about how I am juggling kind of like my needs of the current self, which is like what I do with my daily logging, where I'm just kind of like processing as the day goes on, and the desires of future me and what they want to see when they're looking back on these journals. And so, one of the things that I realized with this, like I mentioned, is that I do prefer having kind of like an undated structure when it comes to daily logging, and then maybe a separate journal for like wins and general highlights so that I can have an overview of my day that is separate from kind of like the reactive moments, for like reflections, right? Like having a space for reflections, especially when it comes time to doing my monthly review. I'm in a group by Jess, planned by Jila. I'm in a workshop group with them, and so we do monthly check-ins, business check-ins, and I do my monthly reflections for that. Having a space where I don't necessarily have to go through every single one of these logs is important to me for just making that easier, right? I think that especially someone who like me who deals with depression and takes antidepressants and what have you, having one space where I kind of have like a general overview of my highlights and my wins for the month is important, so that I can look at that when I'm feeling like a total failure, if you will, which is just normal part of like my life. Like I can't help that, but that's something that I realized that I really needed. And so like while and then of course the morning pages. Um, and then I did decide, something that I did want to talk about too, actually, now that I said that, rules are meant to be broken, right? So, like, I had rules for this particular journal. It was only going to be for October. That being said, I have a bunch of empty pages for the morning pages side, and while I am not going to do any backlogging in the daily logs, I did decide that I would use up however many pages it took me to finish November and December's morning pages in here. Of course, if I finish before the end of the year and I run out of pages, then I'll just move into my morning pages notebook. But so that there are less blank pages in this, I decided that for the morning pages section specifically, I'm going to use it in November and December. So that's what I've been doing. So I've been in this for a little longer for morning pages. And then if I need a space for notes, I will also use the notes section. So it's going to extend a little bit past October in those specific areas, but I am absolutely okay with that. Um, because you set rules for yourself and you set constraints for yourself that are supposed to help you and benefit you, but then you also have the option of deciding that that rule is no longer benefiting you and you can break it. And so that's the case with this one for me. So it started off as just an October journal, but we are going to get leakage into other months with those morning pages and those notes, and I'm absolutely okay with that. So while like this experiment didn't really revolutionize much in my journaling practice, at least not in the way that like I imagined it would, it did kind of like reinforce certain ideas, and I guess gave me clarity on others, right? Like I need some flexibility, I need spaces for different types of reflections, and kind of just more freedom with my journal specifically, right? And that's the beauty of journaling, right? It's not about having a perfect system, but having one that adapts to our needs, like our daily needs and our long-term desires, especially for us where we're using it to like capture life's moments, whether they're big or small. Sometimes it takes trying something new, right, to appreciate what was working and what wasn't, and how the systems that you have really are made by you brick by brick. And, maybe you don't have to alter them every single time so drastically, but it helps you appreciate what was working all along, and then also helps you discover small tweaks that can make it even better.